Good evening, I'm John Bachelor. This is the John Bachelor Show. The day after the attack in London, the attack on Westminster Bridge, the attack at Parliament, the attack on democracy, on the mother country of our democracy, Great Britain. The response by the emergency service is magnificent. The statements by the Prime Minister and the ministers of the government and of the members of Parliament, all magnificent all day long. However, these events are alarming in that it appeared to come from out of nowhere. A man drives a leased vehicle off of the roadway onto the walkway and the bicycle ramp on Westminster Bridge, mows down a collection of young, old, male, female, international guests. One woman from, I believe, the Caribbean was tossed into the Thames, 2 dead, and then stabs a constable who was unarmed to death before he's brought down by bodyguards. All of those events, and we go with Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, major American Jewish organization, welcoming him back from Asia. He's here with me in studio, and we go to Dr.
physically.
And you're here, Malcolm. Dr. Alan Mendoza, founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, and most importantly, he was in London when he first heard this attack, and his thoughts, because he's been looking very carefully at the vulnerability of London targets, especially targets to do with the most vulnerable. That would be the Jewish children, Malcolm, the most vulnerable people. Alan, a very good evening to you. Welcome to America. I understand you're now in Washington, so you can reflect upon those events that happened when you first heard about the attack. What did you make of it? What did you hear? How did people around you respond? Good evening to you, Alan.
Well, good evening, John, and pleasure to be with you as always. And hello, Malcolm. Sadly, we were in our office. The Henry Jackson Society office is actually in Westminster. It's one of the few skyscrapers in London, in that part of London, 26th floor, so we could see everything unfold. Now, we didn't see the attack, but we saw we heard the news, and suddenly we saw sirens everywhere, a flashing sea of blue, and it was obvious to us straight away that, working in this field, that this was a terrorist attack, number one, not an accident of some kind, and that it was clearly initially going to be either a radical Muslim attack or a far-right attack, as we had a problem of far-right attacks last year when an MP was murdered. But very quickly it became apparent, given the details leaking out, that it was highly likely to have been a radical Muslim attack. And so we started to piece together bits and pieces from that moment on.
So the warning we heard about some weeks ago, in fact, I discussed it with John on the air, that I saw. It was a very strange warning. It came from MI5 about the danger of a terrorist attack, the likelihood of an attack, and essentially saying that there was nothing that they could do to prevent it, just putting people on alert and to warn them that it was coming. Was there advance notice of this case? There were reports that somehow he was tracked earlier. Are they going to say it's Lone Wolf again?
No, it's definitely not Lone Wolf, because it's clear that he was in contact in some way, shape or form with other people. So that already means it's not it wasn't that he woke up that morning and decided to get up and do things. However, the problem with these style attacks is that it's very difficult to stop them. You have a case of someone who has leased a car. He's gone out he's got a plan. He hasn't shared it with too many people. It's not a major spectacular like the kind we used to see with Al-Qaeda. The ISIS-inspired attacks are much simpler in nature. They reflect what you've seen in other countries. You've seen this in Israel, where individuals have gotten up and used cars and knives and attacked authority figures. You've seen it in continental Europe, where similar things have happened. And the problem really is that although he was at one point on the radar of the security service, it was several years ago, and resource constraints just mean that with thousands of people to potentially monitor, it's not possible to keep tabs on everyone. There was certainly nothing in his immediate past to suggest that he would turn to this kind of violent approach. However, the warning signs were there. He was a previous criminal. He was a convert to Islam, which is a problematic area in and of itself. And as a result, you have a series of factors coming together that make him a pretty textbook case for what has been the model for Islamist terrorism in Britain, at least, for the last few years.
Alan, I want to learn how you read the British media, consuming the radio, the BBC, the television, the newspapers. is this attack a surprise to the British government? Did they, to the British people? Did they believe that they were protected with the security services, or did they feel vulnerable? And then when this came on, it shook them.
Well, the security services have been quite open with the British public for the last 3 to 4 years. They have repeatedly stated on numerous occasions that London or Britain is a major terror target, that plots are happening all the time, that they are arresting people all the time, but that is not obviously a guarantee that they can be successful every single time. And you know, John, there's a fact in this, which is that the bomber or the terrorist only needs to get lucky once, and the security services need to get lucky all the time in order to prevent this. It seems that given the volume of activity in the UK, the terror plots that are happening, we've been very lucky to have escaped an incident like this for some time, and that it's only been actually the skill of the intelligence services that has prevented it. That doesn't mean the intelligence services, failed in this context, in this particular one. In fact, they should be praised for having stopped so many plots over the last few years. We ourselves have just brought out a 20-year study on Islamist terrorism in the UK, and it details a whole multiplicity of plots of terrorists, of people aiding and abetting terrorists for these period of time, which were actually stopped by the authorities. They do a very good job, but occasionally, the terrorists can get through, and this is one of those cases.
You're right that I think Scotland Yard and I deserve credit because they've been long on the alert and have done a lot. I know in the Jewish community is greatly appreciative, the general community. But what about the House of Parliament? Will they react now? I know that Ms. May went before them, the Prime Minister, and spoke, but will we see new actions, additional resources being applied to this?
Well, it's entirely possible that there'll be a review of obviously how easy it is to get into Parliament and those kind of activities. The point's been made that he got into the building, but only just, and he was taken down straight away. It's also notable, of course, that he didn't have a gun. One of the advantages Britain has over, say, continental Europe and the USA is actually the fact it's very difficult to get hold of an illegal firearm in Britain. And that's obviously a good thing in this kind of context. Had he had a gun, that would have made a very, I think, big difference in terms of the damage he would have actually done, on his sort of rampage after he'd crashed the car. So there probably will be a review, but it's difficult to see how you can guard against someone getting hold of ordinary items like a knife or a car and working out how to stop them doing that.
Is there evidence, though, that ISIS was really involved? I know they made the claim, but have you seen anything in the intelligence reports that this was coordinated with ISIS?
No, I want to make it clear I haven't seen any confidential information on this. ISIS do have a habit of claiming things, whether it's true or not, that's another matter. The issue will be down the line. The police have made several arrests today already. I suspect that in the fullness of time we will discover whether he was in fact in actual contact with ISIS or whether he was merely inspired by ISIS activity. And there's obviously a big difference between the two, but clearly the police already last night stated that the terrorist, before identifying him, had been motivated by international terrorism. So read into that what you will, but there's clearly some link to ISIS, whether that is operational or whether that is an ideological link in some way.
Final question, Alan. This was an attack on Parliament. Intentional or coincidental? Did they mean to strike at the heart of democracy, and is this a victory for them?
Well, absolutely they intended to strike at Parliament. Radicalism, Islamists hate the idea of liberal democracy, and what better symbol of liberal democracy is there than the British Parliament, which has given so much over the years to so many, not just in Britain, but beyond British shores as well. It was a very deliberate target, and it was an attempt to disrupt the British system of government. Was it a triumph? Well, sadly, of course, he did kill some people. So doubtless the terrorists would regard that as a triumph. But I tell you, this morning, in fact, even last night, even Westminster wasn't shut down. London wasn't shut down. They didn't achieve in their sort of target of paralysing the city. It's business as usual in Britain, and it will continue to be so, regardless of what terrorists try.
Dr. Alan Mendoza is the founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. I'm John Bachelor.